There's not like a whole lot of in-depth, let's get deep into this thing. Because I'm not going to get deep into it. I mean, it's a neat ending of a story. And it really is. So starting with verse 1, after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene, who was she?
She was a prostitute.
Yeah, she was a prostitute. Mary Magdalene and then the other Mary came to look at the grave. If you study, and the thing is, I'm not going to go through each gospel, but it's really neat to take time, if you haven't done so, go back and read the other read the other stories about this resurrection, because you get a full picture of what all happens here.
That's not Mary, the mother of Jesus, is it?
Not Mary, the mother of Jesus. It was Mary Magdalene. It was Mary. There were several Marys, in fact. It was Salome, the mother of James and John, and then there was another Mary that of another couple guys. But it was just different groups of women. But here's the key piece, and I don't want to lose this. Jesus first. Well, hold on, we haven't got there yet, so I won't say it yet. Don't get ahead of myself. All right. So they came to the grave. What were they wanting to do?
Dress up the body.
Yeah. They want to prepare the body. They were going to have their guards remove the stone so they could prepare the body. Why?
Prepare.
Yeah, they couldn't do it on Friday. It was too close to the Passover. Passover starts at what time during the day? When does the day begin in the Jewish calendar? Besides Paul.
What do you mean? The day begin?
Well, I'm not Jewish,
Nighttime.
so I wouldn't know.
It's
I'm
sundown.
not Jewish, so I wouldn't know.
Okay.
It's definitely sundown.
It's sundown. It's sundown to sundown. So in a Jewish day, it's not like we start at midnight. For a Jewish day, it actually starts at 6 p.m. or sundown
When sundown comes.
to sundown. You know, so again, and most likely Jesus died in April time frame. So if you think from sundown to sundown during April is around, not counting our Eastern Standard Daylight Time, probably around about 6 o'clock. Okay, 6:30, something like that. So from sundown to sundown is when the day actually begins. Okay, so they're coming as the dawn's rising. Okay, that means they could come. They weren't breaking the laws, and they come. And these women wanted to prepare the body more for burial. Okay, everybody believes he died. There's not a question there that he died. He was in the grave. They were not really ready for the resurrection, even though they told them. The only people that were really kind of ready for the resurrection, if you remember when we studied last chapter, is that the Jews went back to Pilate and said, hey, look, we had heard that this guy's going to come back alive in 3 days. They were the only ones that kind of remembered. The rest of it was just kind of like, yeah, we knew that. We heard him say that, but we didn't expect him to die like he did. We really were expecting him to be the ruler, the great Messiah, the king, who's going to come and conquer the Romans. He didn't do that. He died.
Now, was the resurrection part of Old Testament prophecy?
Yes.
That's what I remembered.
Yes. But his resurrection, or his death and resurrection, was to wash away those sins, to actually be the Lamb of God.
Right.
Okay? And his kingship begins now, and is now, but his kingship on earth comes at the end times. What we're talking about. So, behold, there was a severe earthquake at the time, and occurred, and an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled away the stone and sat upon it. And his appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards shook with fear of him, and became like dead men. And the angel said to the women, do not be afraid. And I love this, and I'll say this over and over again, because I think this is a key piece in Christian life. We are not to live in fear of anything. Anytime you begin to fear something, it shows your lack of trust in God. Be honest with you, just point blank. Every time you see God and Jesus walking on water, first thing he says to the disciples is what? Do not be afraid. I mean, every time something miraculously happens where it could cause fear, God's constantly saying, hey, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, because what happens is when you're afraid, you're putting yourself in charge instead of God being in charge. Bottom line.
Your lack of faith.
Yeah, there's a lack of faith. So in other words, I don't want you to be afraid. I want you to know who I am. I want you to trust in me totally, because as we see down here in the end, he has all authority. But before we get there, let's keep going. So, the angel says, do not be afraid. Verse 4 and 5. Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who has been crucified. He is not here. He is risen, just as he said, okay? Jesus had constantly been saying this, especially this last year of his life, constantly saying, I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be handed over to the Jews and the Gentiles. I'm going to die. You know, Peter's going, oh, no way, you're never going to do this. You know, get away from me, Satan. You know, back when he said, you're the Messiah. And then when Jesus told him, he said, get away from me. Constantly, he would constantly say, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. Just like he said, come and see the place where he was lying. Go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, and behold, I have told you. Now, to get a full picture of what happens, the stones rolled away. If you remember, what was on the stone before they rolled away? There was a seal. Okay, the Jews said, hey, we need to put a seal on this thing to make sure that it wasn't broken.
Can't have somebody seal the body.
Right.
We got to legitimize this thing, man.
Right. So the guards were there to guard, but all of a sudden they end up passing out because they see these two angels. They're totally afraid. The women come up, and it's kind of interesting because this is the key piece. Women's word, and unfortunately during this period of time, women's word was never taken to be much of anything. If you read Luke, when they came and told the disciples, they thought they were just kidding, or, you know, it's a bunch of babbling or whatever. They didn't believe the women. And that's just the culture. You know, but I think it's kind of cool that the first people that God meets after his resurrection is not men, is not the disciples, it's women. You know, to show the value that God has on all people. Because, you know, at this time, and even today, we kind of minimize the woman's role in our lives. You know, oh, she's either supposed to be subservient, she's supposed to be submissive. And the rib was taken from where? From the rib. Not from the foot, not from the head, but from the rib, to keep them side by side, okay? And that's what's so cool about how God created the woman. But anyway, so he says, go and tell the disciples that he is risen. Now, in the grave, when they look inside, what do you think they saw?
Probably a shroud of some kind.
That's right. They saw the burial clothes. When Jesus raised from the grave, he didn't need the burial clothes anymore. And so what was, if you read the other Gospels, you'll find out that the burial clothes basically laid flat. If there was anything that was interesting, in one of the Gospels actually says, he took the scarf that was covering his face, they actually took that and folded it up and put it at the top. So when they came in, they didn't see a body, they just saw where the body had laid and it collapsed. Now, if you never got to see it, and I don't know if they still do it or not, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a tour because they actually found a piece of cloth. And that piece of cloth had the images, or it had the markings and everything else of a person dying from a crucifixion. They actually believed it was the Shroud of Christ. And it's kind of neat thing if you've never seen, or I don't even know if they do the show anymore, or they do that traveling thing around, but you can look it up on the web pages, stuff like that. It's really neat to study that and to see and to learn more about that. But what they saw was an empty grave. They saw the burial clothes collapse. They saw the headscarf being folded up. They came into the tomb and they left the tomb, verse 8, quickly with fear and great joy, and ran to report to his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and greeted them. And they came up to him and took hold of his feet. And you just got a minute, because Mary, one of the Marys, that's where she was always at the feet of Jesus. And so they come down, they bow down, and they worship him. But Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and take the word to my brethren to leave for Galilee, and there they will see me. Now you'll find out that he ends up really showing up. Because again, if you go back to John chapter 17, if you know what that chapter is, that's Jesus' prayer. Okay, that's the night of the Passover, or when they were eating the meal, the Last Supper. And Jesus does this wonderful prayer. And if you never read it, go back and read it. It's John chapter 17. But in John chapter 17, he said, I have not lost anyone, and I will not, and I will always be with them. I want them to be one with us as you and I are one. Okay? So Jesus, even in his prayer, he never, and in Jesus' attempt, as you see in the other Gospels, to meet the two guys on the road to Emmaus, to meet with Peter privately, to meet with a woman, he's constantly trying to show that yes, he is risen.